Today, a special edition of Future Forward.
We take a look at crafts, and in particular, Etsy.
How did it go from being a shaggy craftsperson site to a $26.96 billion valuation?
It is a story worth telling. I'm Stephen Rosenbaum.
And I'm Alexis Cordato. Let's launch.
Hey, Alexa.
Happy Sunday, Steve.
Indeed. And Etsy, my first thought was, can we really do a half hour on Etsy? And then as I started to scribble some notes, I was like, yeah, we could do like 2 hours.
We've been talking about this for weeks. I'm like pumped to talk about Etsy.
All right, so let's do all of our disclosures up top. So have you ever bought anything from Etsy, and have you ever worked for in any capacity Etsy?
I have not. I have bought many things from Etsy, and I've been following their story since they were like early New York City tech, like Digital Dumbo. They were like this local startup in the NYC tech scene.
So many years ago, in a company that I used to run, Etsy was a customer of ours 3 CEOs ago. And I have been back then. I went to their offices a couple of times in Brooklyn, but I have no inside information. I have no secret source. Just I was along for the ride for like 2 months 10 years ago, but enough to like them a lot. So before we get into the story, let's just tell. So I am currently waiting on an Etsy delivery as we speak.
Oh, wait, is it the woodworking, the furniture?
It is the furniture. And I'm excited for the furniture, but a little puzzled by it, I have to say, just a little.
Okay. Why?
Because I guess I thought I was buying from a it's part of what Etsy does is it puts into the universe this idea that there are people toiling away in their wood shop or their crafts, and they're making things for
makers.
You.
Right.
Makers. And the line between makers and kind of like marketers so the only thing that freaked me out a little bit was I reached out to the maker and said something about when it was coming. And he said, it's being built now, which maybe I'm just parsing words, but he didn't say I'm building it now, which made me think he's the middleman between some other maker, which might well be in China. I don't know. We'll see.
He could also be like he could be part of like a larger studio or have like, associates, assistants, like helping. Well, that's what I would like to believe. I hope that's the case.
But that's, I think, part of the Etsy story, and we'll go back to the beginning and go through it. But tell me an Etsy story of something you bought recently.
I mean, during the pandemic, I feel like everything from masks to gifts, like Etsy is where I go if I want just like a personal touch. I mean, the most recent thing I started looking at, this is so dorky to admit, Taylor Swift at the Grammys, she wore this beautiful flower mask, and it almost looked like it was like hand embroidered with layers of like lace and flowers. And there's like someone on Etsy who sells them.
Yeah, that's pretty dorky.
That's pretty dorky.
That's pretty dorky. Taylor Swift look-alike mask. All right, so let's go back and dig into the story of Etsy. So there are a couple of articles that we're going to use to reference, and what's interesting is that even they have kind of like a revisionist history piece to them, I think. So the most detailed article is this New York Times piece from 2017. And by the way, the valuation has leapt up dramatically since then. But the original CEO
Chad
was
Dickerson.
no, not Chad Dickerson.
Oh, but he was like the
But
longest, right? Okay.
well, but he's not the founder.
No.
So the original CEO was last name is Kalin, and I knew I should have written it down because just as I said it, it slipped my mind. Uh, um, um, Robert Kalin in 2005. And the reason I know that name was because he was famously difficult's not the word. He wasn't difficult. He was. I never worked with him. I don't know him, but I do know that he was the CEO twice. He was the CEO at the founding, then he was fired, famously fired.
In 2011.
Then
and that's when Chad became the CEO. Yeah.
No. Fired, rehired, and fired again.
Oh, okay. I missed the first.
It's not. Well, no, because
firing.
it's not written down. I couldn't find, but I know this for a fact. So Fred Wilson, Union Square Ventures, was famously the lead investor and was quite public and passionate, and was the person who was Robert's, I don't even know what, like whisperer,
mentor?
friend.
Yeah.
I don't know if you,
coach.
but in the end, but then fired him and rehired him. And what's weird about the Chad story is that he was brought in to be the buttoned up CEO guy. Like he was the not crafty hippie guy CEO that the investors brought in to right the ship.
Right.
And did. And then got fired.
Right. Yeah, he was a CEO for 6 years.
Yeah, and him I've met, and I liked him. And I think, well, I mean, I guess maybe all CEO hirings are ugly or firings are ugly. But I think these, I mean, part of it is that Etsy had, from day one, a deeply ingrained culture of being kind of a maker community.
Yep. I mean, I think till this day, their mission is still to make commerce more human. Like there's this aspect of like a personal touch that I think they've been known for since their early days.
Like being able to speak to, like when you put in a message, when I was looking at 2 different pieces of furniture and I spoke to both of the makers and they were both responsive and nice. And they said they could, make them a different size or they could change the like there was a lot of customization. And we picked one and we didn't pick the other. So, and then I felt a little bad. But like, you can't talk to the people that make your stuff at, Home Depot or Walmart or anywhere else.
Right. Yeah. I mean, the 2 really personal purchases. One, a t-shirt blanket. If you have like all of these sentimental t-shirts and you're like, they're just sitting in a drawer. Like I don't wear them. You can actually go on Etsy and there are people who will sew them into like a blanket, like a throw. And so I've done that. Yes.
Really?
And it's awesome. Because yeah.
I'm going to do that. I had an Etsy maker do this again. We're going to just confess all this random stuff on the pod today,
we're buying from Etsy. It's good stuff. I love the t-shirt blanket. I
found a artist to do when our wonderful dog passed now a couple of years ago. I needed a portrait, and we sent them a picture and went back and forth and tweaked it a bunch of different times and got to a picture of Louis that we really, really liked. And then we had it printed on canvas and put it up on the wall. So we've become those, dear departed dog picture people, which we never thought we'd be. But the thing that I think is a cautionary tale, I know a couple. I know that the new CEO did some kind of an edict about free shipping and essentially sent out some kind of a shipping must be free. You must include shipping in your price. You can't mark up shipping. Figure it out essentially, or offered some services. But a lot of the makers didn't like that.
I mean, I don't even really know how you do that, because for me, that move is very similar to looking at apartments in New York that say no broker's fee. Because usually what happens then is the landlord just builds in the broker's fee into the monthly rent. Instead of paying $2,500 a month, you're going to pay $2,600 a month. And $1,200 is going to go to the broker.
And once the broker's paid off, it's still $2,600 a month. So the landlord wins.
Yeah.
Oh, I didn't know that. That's creepy. But I guess my question is, just rationally, if I said to you, hey, Alexa, I'm going to start a business. It's going to be based on mostly women doing handcrafted goods, little trinkety, nice knitted, painted things. And I'm going to get to $26 billion in valuation. That's a lot of like t-shirt blankets.
I never, ever would have predicted Etsy to be a Fortune 500 company.
But I guess what I'm saying is, and you know, so if you read, so here's this Atlantic, or this is from the list. This is the untold story of the untold truth of Etsy. And you know, if you read into it, there's really no way you get to 26 billion without a big chunk of that revenue coming from resellers who are buying and, you know, who are selling thousands of pieces of candles, or, you know, they're not sitting in their garage hand packing the candles up.
Yeah. It's like what they had to do as a business is almost build a brand and sort of the promise of a marketplace that was sort of, you know, again, that maker personal touch. But the marketplace itself is not a pure reflection of that brand ethos, right? It's like, in order for them to reach like economies of scale, the marketplace is like exactly what you just said. It's a combination of mom and pop crafts people reselling things, and also people who are getting just goods from China, overseas, etc. And so it's definitely become further and further from what I think we came to know and love about Etsy as a startup.
So it reminds me a little bit like the story, like the business arc of eBay, which started out being, you know, people selling other people collectible Beanie Babies. And now, as far as I can tell, is just a complete unmitigated pile of garbage. I mean, like,
I have not bought and sold on eBay in a long time.
I've bought and sold twice over the last 15 years, and both experiences were just absolutely horrifically terrible.
I actually did. I mean, I don't really have any recent knowledge of eBay, but I actually thought that the seller reviews were like mitigated like control, like they helped eliminate fraud and, I don't know, reinforce like a culture of trust and reliability. Is that not true anymore?
I sold a camera lens and shipped it, and it was received, and then like a month later the buyer said, this was a ripoff. The lens wasn't the model that I was some nonsense, and then filed a claim and got his money back. And then Etsy came after me, or not Etsy, eBay came after me and said, you have to refund his money, and then he'll maybe ship it. It was very weird. It was just like, it wasn't, it made me run away and never want. And also eBay has all this news, like it's all this product stuff and storefronts and, but back to Etsy, which is actually what the pod is about. So here's, I think, the question. You build a brand based on it being very handcrafted and very craftsy. You build a culture based on that. Then you bring in a new sheriff CEO in Chad to grow the business and do an IPO, and he does both of those things. And then you're now a public company, and quote activist investors come in, deliver this new CEO, throw Chad out, I think pretty unceremoniously. And the first thing activist investors do is like essentially start chopping away at all of the goodwill piece internally. And maybe the clue to this, which would be unknown to customers, is Etsy was a B corporation, was a public benefit corporation.
Mm-hmm.
And they unwound that.
Yeah.
It is no longer a B corporation.
Yep.
And to be honest, I didn't know you could do that. Like, I guess you can unwind anything, but that seemed weird to me.
Well, I think part of the B corporation is that you commit to it, and then they actually check up on you to make sure that you can still uphold that status. Because any company that's a B Corp that's failing on its commitment then actually deteriorates that status, and it kind of ruins it for everyone.
So what's interesting is, I mean, maybe it's just a matter of it turning into eBay and it just hasn't turned into it yet. That's probably not fair.
No, I mean, here's the thing. Whether it's eBay, whether it's Etsy, whether it's Craigslist, even Nextdoor, or dare I even say it, Facebook Marketplace, I root for really any marketplace, because in the absence of that, you actually have Amazon as a giant behemoth monopoly.
Yeah, I'm in the middle of a not great experience with Craigslist at the moment. I'm trying to find a vendor to do some work.
Yes, I mean, but like that, I think the competition is good. I actually do like the fact that if I want to shop for, I don't know, a cutting board or a gift or something, like I don't have to default to Amazon, right? That I can look somewhere else.
Yeah, no, I agree. And I guess the question that I'm asking is, does IPO and green eye shade investor money always inevitably turn company vision into capitalist outcomes? I don't know. I mean, so far, so this Built in NYC article only was up to 2015.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm not sure that's not the current chapter.
And back then, what did that say? That article was a $1.8 billion valuation or market cap, which is crazy, right?
26 is today.
Yeah.
So I guess the question that I think is worth asking, is it possible to be homespun and personal and big?
I guess, I don't know. I get very conflicted about this, especially when we look at big tech, because it's in some ways, like when you scale orders of magnitude, scaling your original kind of brand promise is very, very hard to do. You can look at even, say, Apple, right? One of the most valuable companies in the world. That like Steve Jobs was like an indie thinker, like the notion of think different, right? And um being for artists and people who are not necessarily mainstream, like that's not really Apple's ethos anymore. Not when they have the market penetration and the size, scale, and influence that they do.
Right. And they did fuck up Final Cut, which I will never forgive them for.
Mm-hmm. But like, I mean, again, it's like in some ways, like it feels like at every stage of growth, you're always going to alienate a set of early adopters, and you are always going to have to almost shed part of your original brand promise, but then you have to kind of evolve it. Not necessarily pivot, but you have to evolve in order to grow.
So, the other company that I would put on this list, keep in mind, Craigslist never sold, never took outside capital. The other day I posted a job, I needed a gig listing, and they charged me $10, which used to be free, but I was fine. But let's talk about Kickstarter.
Mm-hmm.
So the founders of Kickstarter famously didn't sell, didn't take outside money, and I think remain a B corporation. But I used to pretty regularly invest in Kickstarter projects, and I don't much anymore.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know why that is. Just not in my field of vision. I don't know why. Not making their way into my feed very much.
Mm-hmm. I have it's funny, my only experience or insider insight is that I've interviewed many former employees over the years.
Well, if they were smart, they said nothing bad about their former company.
Yeah.
No one wants to hear someone crying over spilled milk. If you're thinking of do you hire them?
I hired a couple of them, yeah.
And
I worked with one of the former CTOs. And again, I think, it's funny because I've worked in startups for, I don't know, over a decade. And I used to have this very romantic view about employment at startups. Like, oh, we're manufacturing the Kool-Aid, we're building in flight, we're building something bigger than we are. This is like part of who I am. And I actually think it's almost like there's a role everyone can play in a startup story, and that sort of that growth cycle and the ups and downs, like people are just naturally interchangeable. It's like it's so rare, I think, to see kind of that same cast of people who are maybe great in the beginning be good, down the road when the company is a completely different animal. Being a CEO of a Series A company versus a Series C company versus a publicly traded company, I actually don't really know of a person who wants that job or those three jobs.
yeah. Well, I mean, they're really different jobs, and they, I mean, I remember when one of my companies got to be over 90 employees, and I just remember being frustrated because I'd essentially promoted myself up to a level where I didn't get to make anything anymore, and mostly what I did was deal with one or two unhappy employees or one or two issues that were taking up the bulk of my job at that point. Was like fireman more than creator, and salesman, chief salesman, right. Which
which you're very good at.
Yeah, I am pretty good at it, but it's certainly not, like it's not the same thing as being a maker.
Yeah. So after reading all of these Etsy articles and revisiting the company's history and really seeing it explode during the pandemic, Do you think that they sort of deflate back down to pre-pandemic valuation when things go back to, I'm putting air quotes, normal?
Well, I have to say this, when you're not eating out a lot and you're not traveling and you're not, like if you were breaking even or making a little bit of money based on your lifestyle and you were healthy and you had stayed indoors and didn't get in cabs or go to Starbucks, you ended up with a bunch of disposable income that you didn't have before. And probably you spent it on, and you weren't buying shoes or pants or anything below the waist, right? I mean, it is funny. It's like as the weather gets nicer and we start thinking about going out of the house, both Pam and I are like, oh, we need new shoes. We haven't bought shoes in a year.
Retail therapy.
Yeah, well, but also like, we need to be presentable on the universe again because we are going to be out in the universe again. So I do think that's, I think that what the pandemic did was introduce a lot of people to different ways to interact with Etsy and Kickstarter and Amazon to some extent. I fixed a whole lot of broken stuff in my apartment that cost $15 times 30, like light switches and plugs and outlet covers and just stuff that was like not expensive but had been floated into a little bit of disrepair. So no, I think that if you think about it, there were things that you never would have imagined doing remotely that you did in the last year. Things you bought, ways you interacted, games you played online. And I think some of those habits will last. Although I don't think I'm going to be baking a lot of sourdough bread.
Yeah. Did I just exit out?
I don't know. I hear you.
Oh, okay. I think I just lost the video tab. The good news about Etsy is that it really built up so much brand equity in the last year, right? Like I think that people who were unfamiliar with Etsy or first-time purchasers, I do believe that they will return. It might not be buying, masks. Etsy has sold like a ridiculous amount of face masks during the pandemic.
I bet that's right.
But I do hope that, they actually have a new set of consumers who see it as another alternative to Amazon.
Well, with that, we are done with our Etsy show. So we're going to run the credits and we will see you next week.
Bye.
Bye-bye.